Now presenting Joe Hayon with Inspira Technology.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Inspira is a medtech company established in 2018 with the goal to develop and prevent the need for invasive mechanical ventilation. So before we dive deep into the subject, we're going to talk a little bit about acute respiratory failure. So many people do suffer from acute respiratory failure. Around about 20 million every single year end up in ICUs with acute respiratory failure, which basically means that they have difficulty breathing. During that process, they have difficulty having oxygen enter their lungs and into the bloodstream. Unfortunately, for millions, the only real solution is getting placed on an invasive mechanical ventilator, meaning that they get intubated, they get placed into a coma, and they have the machine, the mechanical ventilator, breathe for them until the doctors try to take care of the underlying medical problem. Now, unfortunately, invasive mechanical ventilation comes with a price. The medical sector itself will associate these complications, and using their terms, they will call them ventilator-induced lung injury or ventilator-associated pneumonia, which basically just emphasizes that the mechanical ventilator itself often prevents and creates injury to the patient, affecting outcome. And just looking at statistics, right? About 30% of patients will suffer post-traumatic stress. 40% of patients will be readmitted within 30 days of treatment. And unfortunately, there's over a 50% mortality rate. Now, this is the exact reason why we set up Inspira. We understood that patients today on invasive mechanical ventilation are actually being pushed down a slippery slope. And there is an outcome which shouldn't really be acceptable. We understand and we appreciate that mechanical ventilation is a form of life support, and it's helped a lot of people. But there should be such a harsh mortality rate? Should we really be in these days in a situation that in order to treat a patient, you still need to shut them down, place them in a coma, shut down their lungs, and take them down this difficult pathway? Now, in a sense, if we look at the situation today, when a person has acute respiratory failure, they'll be brought into the medical unit, emergency room, eventually make their way to the ICU. And I'm just going to explain to you a bit of the pathway. So the person's having difficulty breathing, their medical indexes, their parameters are deteriorating. The doctors will start and provide some type of supplementary oxygen. It may be an oxygen mask over the nose and mouth. It may be a high-flow nasal cannula, the tube that you often see under the nose. But the patient often, in about 50% of cases, will continue to deteriorate. Now, the doctor is faced with a huge dilemma because no one wants to place a patient in a coma because you basically are losing information. You can't communicate with the patient. You've got to maintain a patient in the coma. It requires a lot of resources, a lot of hospital resources. So it's always best to keep the patient away. But unfortunately, in today's world, the only thing that doctors can really offer is to have the patient basically say goodbye to their family, understand they're going to be placed in a state of coma, intubated, and have the machine breathe for them. Now, what's really happening is that if it's not a quick process of a couple of days, whereby the medication's kicking in and the patient's getting better, the patient will develop complications. They will most likely have a situation with damage to the blood. They may even have pneumonia brought on by the bacteria in the tubing. And if that's not enough, the longer you're on the machine, it's going to have a bigger impact on the actual patient. So patients will develop pressure wounds. They will develop muscle wastage. So after a week, 2-3 weeks, you may actually be dealing with medical problems that are much more life-threatening than the actual respiratory issue that we started with, whether it's a disease or infection. Now, what we have here today is basically a respiratory gap because we have a very early stage type of treatment that's non-invasive. And if that doesn't work, we're going all the way to what FDA defines as life support. And this is exactly where Inspira comes in. So we can understand that there's a place here for a new technology, a new solution, a disruptive technology. And if we want to bring value, we want to be able to come and fill in this gap. And what does that mean? We want to provide a new type of treatment that will treat the patient while they're awake, while their lungs are still functioning, and therefore prevent the need to go to invasive mechanical ventilation. So I'd like to share with you a video about Inspira's product, the INSPIRA ART, which is being designed to do exactly that.
Most people take breathing for granted. After all, spontaneous breathing is a natural process that occurs whether we are awake or asleep. But for some people, every breath is a challenge. Over 400 million people suffer from respiratory insufficiency. Every year, nearly 20 million end up on respiratory life support, and millions die. Doctors facing patients with these treatment challenges administer supplemental oxygen using devices such as nasal cannulas. And when supplemental treatment is insufficient, their only option is to induce coma, intubate, and place the patient on mechanical ventilator that is not only expensive and complex to use, but puts the patient at high risk. This further emphasizes the huge gap between basic respiratory care and an intervention that should be used as a treatment of last resort. Inspira's early extracorporeal respiratory support system, the ART, bridges this gap, delivering the right level of care. Introducing Inspira ART, the solution designed to boost oxygen saturation levels immediately. The treatment aims to be administered by a trained clinician, eliminating the need for ICU-level care. Let's understand how this breakthrough technology works. Inspira's dual lumen cannula is inserted into the jugular vein. Blood with low oxygen saturation is continuously drawn through the cannula's intake lumen into the ART. The innovative proprietary ART's pump circulates the blood at an optimal rate of 1,000 cc per minute while preventing thrombosis and hemolysis. The blood flows to the oxygenator, which oxygenates the blood and removes CO2 with only a minimal drop in blood pressure and low shear force, protecting the red blood cells. The oxygenated blood returns through the lumen to the jugular vein. Even though the ART treats blood in low volumes, it is expected to raise the patient's oxygen saturation to 95% or higher in 60 seconds. This device brings immediate relief to the patient while being easy to operate without the need for ICU expertise. Inspira ART sets the new standard in respiratory care, bringing hope to millions.
Goal? Life support. In other words, come in at an earlier stage, prevent the need for coma, prevent the need for intubation, and definitely eliminate the patient being in a situation where they will experience ventilator-induced or associated injuries, which are a big contributing factor to the outcome. We plan to treat the patient while they're awake, while their lungs are still breathing on their own, and we plan the system designed to boost oxygen saturations in just minutes. Therefore, it stabilizes the patients and provides the doctors a window of opportunity to actually treat the patient in a much more controlled environment. Now, to understand what the potential impact is on the market, right? Today, hospitals are almost collapsing from having too many patients in the ICU. Yes, COVID was an extreme situation. We saw what happened there, but it's not like the problems disappeared. There are still millions of people every year placed on these mechanical ventilators. And there's obviously more burden on the resources, that's also going to impact the patient outcome. But the fact that we are able to design a system to treat a patient while they're awake, it actually means you don't need an anesthetist. It means you don't need to keep the patient in a coma. The system has also other elements that assist with the technology. For example, like a dual lumen cannula, which just a few months ago was approved by the US Patent Office. It's a very unique cannula. It's almost a cannula within a cannula. That means that with one insertion point, there's both an inlet and an outlet. in a cannula that is extremely short in relation to other cannulas on the market that are used, for example, in ECMO. Now, what it actually allows you to change the application of the cannula, because you may use something that's got one insertion. In other words, maybe you want to deliver something through that cannula, but when you want to turn it into a cannula for oxygenation purposes, you basically put a cannula within a cannula and you change its intent of use. There are other elements of the system which also will reduce the ICU level, the need for ICU level of care to a certain level, and that's the disposable kit. A very unique disposable kit whereby we have taken everything and we're packing it into a box. So most systems today, whether it's mechanical ventilators, ECMOs, any other types of life support, the kit, you have to open it, you have to assemble it, you have to self-prime it, you have to remove air embolism or prevent air embolism. It takes a lot of work, puts the patient at risk. Here we're talking about entire disposable kit packed within a box. Now, in order to get an INSPIRA ART, we've also developed what we call the building blocks to the INSPIRA ART. And this has a lot of value. Why? Because we're able to take a core technology and turn them into standalone products. And these products can be brought to the market at an earlier stage. And that's exactly what we're doing. As investors, or if you're from the medical world or the medical industry, this is just only showing you in a very visual manner what our products are about, what our technology is about, and we're basically showing at an earlier stage what we can do instead of waiting for flagship products until they reach the market. So, for example, the INSPIRA ART, the way it's designed is basically removing oxygen, removing CO2 and oxygenating the blood. But in order to do this in a controlled manner, you need to know what's happening within the blood at every given time to provide safety. And so we developed a blood sensor. And here's an example of the blood sensor. So we took the blood sensor that's in the INSPIRA ART and we've turned this into a standalone product. And what it is, it's basically you've got a tube with blood flowing through it, and you place the sensor, it clips over the tube. And what it uses is an optical sensor with an AI-based model and algorithms. It's non-invasive. In other words, there's no physical contact between the sensor and the blood. And it's basically looking at the digital images of the blood passing through the tube and converting that information to key blood parameters. What does that mean? Potentially, we would be able to say, okay, we know what the saturation level of the patient's blood at every given time, continuously, real time, without taking a drop of blood, for example. And if you can do that, you can use the higher blood sensor to see what's happening with the patient. In other words, if all of a sudden he's deteriorating, something's happening to the patient's key parameters, we would know about it and inform the medical team. But we can also take the sensor and connect it to the artificial lung, whether it's the ART or whether it's an ECMO machine or a machine that's used for open heart surgery. And we can actually monitor what's happening within the machine. In other words, if the blood coming out of the machine, if it has any issues. And it could basically, it's designed to identify if there will be problems, let's say, with clotting or fatigue in the oxygenator. And why is that important? Because a lot of time in these medical conditions, there's often either a problem with the patient or there's a problem with the equipment, and both of them have a huge impact on a patient and cause deterioration. And nobody knows about it. Okay, because you can't take blood tests every 5 seconds, and very few pieces of equipment really know how to do this. And we're talking about a system that would cost just a few $1,000s, disposable kits, disposables just a few $100s, and this could turn any extracorporeal system, whether it's open heart surgery equipment, ECMO, the INSPIRA ART, and make it a lot smarter and provide a lot more valuable information. Now, where are we with this product, which is basically a key technology for the INSPIRA ART? It's already currently in human studies, clinical studies. I'll just say clinical studies in Sheba, which is ranked the 9th top hospital in the world. And later this year, we will be sharing some results. And we're planning an FDA submission in 2024. So this is a perfect example of how we are taking a key technology of the flagship INSPIRA ART and already turning it into a standalone product. And it could be used in about 1.2 million procedures performed worldwide, where extracorporeal procedures are involved. The product on the right-hand side is what we call the ALICE. The ALICE is a salvation treatment. It's a treatment used when it's basically used for cardio or pulmonary support. In other words, if someone has a very bad heart attack or their lungs are in a really bad shape, it can be used with a mechanical ventilator, it can be used standalone. But the difference is that it's pumping all the cardio output outside the body. In other words, about 7 liters of blood. All the blood is being passed through the system, just like in open heart surgery, keeping the patient alive while the doctors are taking care of the very acute medical problem. Happy to tell you that this product is already in the middle of contract manufacturing. It's going to the FDA in a couple of months. So if you follow the company, you can see that in the second half of this year, we will hopefully be reporting on the FDA submission, and hopefully we'll have FDA clearance by early 2024, meaning we can continue with deployment. So we're already creating traction. You can actually see the products, how they are moving, developing, going down that pathway from development to go to market. And of course, their success is a huge contribution to us entering the market with the INSPIRA ART in the future. The company has several patent families. We obviously have lots of patents. We have organized them into patent families. There's a lot of logic to do it from a business point of view. So we have a special device that holds cannulas in place, and that's been approved. We have the dual lumen cannula, very, very unique dual lumen cannula for the INSPIRA ART. Just that you know that you have certain types of cannulas today that are dual lumen, which means they're both in and out, that they can cost thousands of dollars. Hospitals don't use them because they're too expensive and they're very invasive. We're talking about a cannula which is less invasive, a lot shorter, and it's been designed so that it can be manufactured at very low cost. So it's not potentially will not only be used for what we're doing, it could be used for revenue purposes or to create traction in the market. Thirdly, we have the third family, which is a very important family. It's the extracorporeal oxygenation process using small volumes of blood. Now we have filed several technologies for patent approval, and they're all part of the ART. And we hope this year to get the results, and hopefully they'll be granted. But I want to just emphasize, we've not only submitted for the technology, we've actually submitted for the procedure, and you can do this in the US. So we've actually submitted a patent to use direct blood oxygenation at a partial flow, in other words, in small volumes, in order to prevent the need for mechanical ventilation. So should we be granted that patent, that would mean that we would actually have IP over the procedure in the market. If you understand what that means, it's not only the technology, it's actually the intent of use. So should that happen, it's very, very, very significant. Now, we're building value, and you need to know what we've done to date if you're not familiar with the company. We have patents granted in Israel, the US. We have already signed an exclusive OEM agreement with one of the largest medical device companies in the space. If you go look at a PR from December 27th, if I'm correct, of 2022, you'll see one of the largest medical device companies, one of their divisions, signed an OEM agreement with us. We have preconditional distribution agreements of a few $100 million, both in the US, in Israel, and in Europe, certain countries in Europe. They're over up to a 7-year period, depending on the agreement. But that basically means that we have distributors that are interested to work with INSPIRA, interested to bring their products to market. And that just shows how we are making progress in the go-to-market pathway. We have world-renowned key opinion leaders that have joined our board. We have almost about a dozen. And they're not just any doctors. If you go and look at the list, you've got heads of ECMO or extracorporeal. And I'm very proud to say that, everything that we do here is called extracorporeal. That's the medical sector. Blood flow, blood circulation, removing CO2 and oxygen. So we actually have the president of the International Extracorporeal Life Support Organization on our board. Okay, so, and you probably will be familiar with the society's events. We have ELSO, which is held every year. So it's we're very, very proud to have doctors of this caliber on our scientific advisory board. We're already conducting clinical studies in Sheba, top 9 ranked hospitals in the world, on the HILA, on the blood center, and hopefully we'll be able to share results later on this year. And finally, all our products are designed to be based on the razor blade model. Now, what I'm also going to tell you is that these products are being designed to be manufactured at a very affordable cost. So, for example, mechanical ventilator or invasive mechanical ventilator, they can reach about $75,000. We would potentially be able to develop and manufacture the ART at a fraction of that cost. The same thing with the ECMO. And what does that mean? It means that we could potentially have the ability to bundle the machines together with the disposable kits in order to deploy them for free. And so that obviously, for example, the INSPIRA ART, if you look at the cost of the consumables, there is a potential that if you provide treatments for like 10, 12 patients, in other words, for about a quarter, 12 weeks to 13 weeks of treatments, you'd be able to cover the cost of the system itself. Okay, so that's a very significant part because we can maybe potentially overcome any budgetary or financial issues the hospitals will have and therefore deploy them rapidly when the product is ready. Now, to just understand the size of the potential market, there are millions and millions of people on invasive mechanical ventilators. It's a market with lots of players. So any new technology entering that market is going to disturb that market. And should we be successful, should we even treat 500,000 patients at a cost of just, let's say, $2,000 per disposable kit, that's $1 billion in income. So you need to understand the potential of bringing these types of products to a market that hasn't seen a lot of technological improvement over the last few decades. Milestones. So we have the INSPIRA ART. This is the product that is going to hopefully revolutionize the acute respiratory care market, a multi-billion-dollar market. We have already had patents that have been approved. We hope that additional patents will be approved. We will hopefully continue next year with the verification validation process of the system and eventually go into human studies next year. And that's going to be a very, very big event. Our whole structure is built that we do human studies, perform human studies ahead of FDA submission. Why? Because we're integrating technologies, integrating capabilities. We're locking down what the right clinical pathways, the right patient population. And the whole intention is to make sure that the pivotal trial will be as smooth as possible and as short as possible going forward. The HYLA, which is basically a sub-technology of the INSPIRA ART, it's already in clinical studies. We hope that we'll be able to share results later on this year. And next year, hopefully it will go through an FDA submission process and receive clearance. And hopefully we can enter the market and target those 1.2 million procedures where this product would be greatly required. I do want to emphasize as well that the HYLA is also going to be join the ALICE as a next generation product. So we're creating the HYLA to actually going to work in the future with our ALICE product to make the ALICE very superior in its capabilities. Okay, so anything that's going to have the sensor will make the product potentially more superior. The ALICE, as I said, it's in verification validation. We're just months away from FDA submission, a very, very big event. We're a small company. The fact that we can provide an ECMO product in the market is a very, very big piece of news. And why? Because if you go look at the market, it's only the biggest players. And there are only a handful of them that have FDA approval in the US. So the fact that a small company, we've got a $50 million cap, the fact that we can enter the market and get into the same game as the big boys is very significant. There are a lot of eyeballs on what the company is doing. We have proof of that because we already have an OEM agreement with one of the largest medical device companies in the world, and we have distribution agreements. And we believe that the ALICE is going to basically open the pathway for the rest of the products because it's going to place us, could potentially help us penetrate the market, open up many doors. This may lead to agreements, business opportunities with other players in the market because they realize, in my opinion, I'll just say it's my opinion, companies realize that to rock the invasive mechanical ventilation market is a big deal because a lot of companies there, they're all holding a few percentage of the market. No one's dominant enough. They realize that extracorporeal is the way to go. It's been proved in many areas, in many cases, including COVID. We have ECMO systems, so they know it works. But if we can succeed to do it using just small quantities of blood while the patient's awake, while they're still breathing, and use it at a much earlier stage to prevent invasive mechanical ventilation, it potentially will revolutionize a multi-billion-dollar market. And again, we hope that whatever we do, it's not only about the business opportunity. We also believe that this will obviously save a lot of money for the medical healthcare centers. And most importantly, we must always go back to our core values, is that it will actually maybe potentially save a lot of lives and a lot of pain for many people that end up on invasive mechanical ventilation. So thank you very much, and I'm open to questions. Sure. So the question basically is, do you see the products being used out of ICUs, right? Let's say. Yeah. So basically, I'll just go. The ECMO is a system that's really ECMO centers. It's the high end of the ICU, okay, because of the condition of the patient. But the HYLA, for example, could be used in operating theaters. At the moment in ICUs, maybe we'd be able to take it anywhere else where there's blood flowing through a tube, and there are other applications. The ART is designed long-term to be outside the ICUs. Because, okay, so we're starting off with ICUs. We want market penetration, market adoption. But because we're working on eliminating the ICU level of dependency, because of the fact that patients are awake and the way the system's designed, we hope that over time we'll be able to get out to smaller hospitals, rural hospitals, clinics, areas where there is expertise, but more towards a high care or step down and further away from an ICU. But again, that's an evolution because you've got to build that confidence with the market. You always start with an ICU, and hopefully they'll start using the product a lot earlier, because today it's either non-invasive mechanical ventilation, oxygenation, or invasive mechanical ventilation. And they're very scared, the doctors, because what do you choose? The worst of two evils. And hopefully if we bring this capability, they'll start using it obviously just before they go to invasive mechanical ventilation. But as they build confidence, they'll start using it earlier, hopefully. And that's where we're going to see maybe the change in the clinical setting. So the Alice is a 510K, despite the fact that you'll see it's a very unique design and it's got a lot of special features. We'll just leave it as a 510K. The Hyla being a non-invasive blood sensor, we believe we will be able to use a 510K, which makes it a lot more simple. The ART could be a de novo or a PMA. The difference is that de novo is for new tech. It's not used that often, so it's got its advantages and disadvantages because the FDA doesn't always know what the pathway is. It's worthwhile doing the PMA because it just makes it a lot more difficult for anybody to try penetrate the market after hopefully we succeed. No, so the ALICE is an ECMO, an extracorporeal membrane oxygenation machine. It's often known also as CBB, cardiopulmonary bypass support. So it will go under that 510K predicate. Hopefully the Hyla as well, there could be a predicate that we use there, we've identified. The Hyla is a new technology and a new intent of use. So it will go down its own pathway and hopefully become the next standard of care, meaning that anybody who wants to try penetrate the market will have to deal with this both on the patent level, hopefully also on the patent for a method of use, and hopefully we do a PMA, the wall will be so high that there won't be too much to do there on their behalf. Just one thing, with regard to cash, we entered the year with almost $14 million in cash. We go to about $900,000 a month. So we do have runway into 24. We do have money and the funds to finance the human studies and both the submission and hopefully also the clearance of the ALICE. So we have a lot of news. And I do want to emphasize, if you're familiar with the company, you'll see that we've had days that despite the fact that there are only 11 million shares out there, okay, which about 25% are held by insiders, other 25 are pre-IPO investors, which are very, I don't want to go into it, but they are very much looking at the endpoint. You'll see that we've had days of 160 million shares turning over, 100 million shares, 80 million shares. So when there's good news, the market knows how to react to what we're doing. And I look forward to that happening in the future as well. All right. Any more questions? All right. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you coming out today.